What is going on, guys? I am Paul Ryan, your host of the Not ATB Fantasy Show. If you're new to the show, thank you for joining us. And to our regular listeners, welcome back. With me, as always, is the best co-host in the world and creator of the Pigskin Papers website, Dave Pigskin Papers Hartman. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Paul. I'm a little sad because there's only one NFL game left this season, and that's always a bummer. But we knew this day would come. I'm excited for the Super Bowl. How you doing?
I'm good, Dave. Don't remind me about this being the last game of the season. It's painful to think about, sir.
I know it's tough. It'll be back before you know it.
Yeah, and you know what? I won't lie. I really enjoy doing the off-season content. That really helps pass the time.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like you look online and stuff. There's already so much talk about the NFL draft.
Yeah.
Football really is king. I mean, the NFL really is king. I saw some crazy thing the other day. 97 of the top 100 rated TV shows last year were football of some kind, and most of that was the NFL. It's just they're printing money over there. The gambling is now legal in more and more states, so that's attracting more and more people, more casual fans.
Yeah.
In addition to fantasy football, obviously, but kind of between like fantasy football and all the prop bets and gambling that casual fans can do from their phone, which is kind of dangerous, of course.
Right.
But sitting in their own living rooms with their phones and Sunday Ticket and other things where you can get all the games and sports bars that show all the games. It's just shows no sign of slowing down. I remember a couple years ago when all the concussion stuff was kind of coming to a head and people were saying, well, parents aren't going to let their kids play football anymore. And in 20 years, lacrosse will be the big fall sport in schools, and eventually the NFL, won't have enough players, or football just won't be popular enough. But I don't see it going in that direction at all. So you and I will still be in business doing our podcast, I think, for a while if we want to, because the popularity of this sport is only going in one direction.
Dave, I can see us doing this 20 years from now. I really can.
Yeah, well, I hate to tell you this, but 20 years from this year, I'll turn 80. So if I can still make coherent sentences and I'm not drooling, I'll get on the air with you happily and talk about my Miami Dolphins and how they won 10 Super Bowls in the last 20 years.
Yeah, hopefully the Cowboys will have won at least one in the next 20 years, Dave.
We can only wish, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dave, before we get into our discussions tonight, where can we find you on Not Twitter?
Yes, on Not Twitter, also known as X, I'm at PigskinPapers. And my website, where I haven't written anything in a little bit, but I'm going to get started again soon, is thepigskinpapers.com. How about you, Paul? Where can everyone find you?
Yes, I am Paul Ryan. You can find me on X at Paul_Ryan15. Well, Dave, our Super Bowl matchup is set, and we've got a rematch of Super Bowl. Forgive me for not remembering Roman numerals.
54, I think.
54. 4 years ago, the Chiefs beat the 49ers 31-20 to capture their first Lombardi trophy since 1970. Amazingly, the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl for the fourth time in 5 years, and they're looking for their third win in the Reid Mahomes era. Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers have been knocking on the door as an elite NFL squad for the past 5 or so years, and they're trying to bring San Francisco its sixth Super Bowl, but its first one in close to 30 years. We'll spend a lot of time breaking down the Super Bowl, but first we'll spend a little more time recapping the games on Championship Sunday and how we got here. So, Dave, let's get after it.
Yeah, so thinking back, I know it was over a week ago, but I thought a couple of pretty interesting games. We probably had the four best teams in the NFL or close to it playing in the championship games. It was the 2 1 seeds hosting the 2 3 seeds. We had one upset. We had one team barely hold serve. And so we've got, the Chiefs, who I think preseason people would have looked at them and said they were one of the, 2 favorites in the AFC. And you look at the 49ers, also one of the top 2 teams, I think, in the NFC. And both teams that are here this year were in at least conference championship games last year. So kind of no real surprise here. The two games have been broken down and dissected a lot over the last week.
Yeah.
The Ravens just kind of made a ton of mistakes, never really looked like themselves, fell behind, had a weird game plan, had a devastating turnover as they were about to score a touchdown. Didn't play like the dominant team they were all season, and credit the Chiefs for that. But they lost at home in just kind of a bad, sloppy loss. And then the Lions, on the other hand, got out to a big lead, kind of punched the 49ers in the mouth. Before you knew it, they were up 17 at the half. Blew that in the second half with, we'll get into that a little bit with how that happened. But in your estimation, Paul, who had the worst loss of those two teams? Was it the Ravens or the Lions?
It has to be the Lions, man. I mean, they were up 17 points. I don't know how you blow that lead. That's just it really was upsetting to see that happen. It really was, because I was rooting for the Lions. Of course, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there was a certain matchup I think everybody was rooting for. And of course, we're not going to get that, but it was weird to see it all take place, especially that second half. It was like the Lions just, I don't know, not gave up, but they couldn't get out of their own way.
Yeah. I'm going to go a little, I think it was a bad loss for both teams. In my estimation, it was a worse loss for the Ravens. And I know you can argue this either way, because
the
Lions should have won the game. Like going in, they were the underdogs, but they should have won the game. They had control of the game. 49ers couldn't stop them on defense, and they could have made the 49ers just play catch up in the second half and kept the ball away from them by running the ball. And, we'll get into that more. I think in the case of the Ravens, like, they were the most dominant team in the NFL this season. And everything was kind of set up for them. Lamar was the MVP and they were at home. The Chiefs are a little bit offensively challenged and the Ravens have such a suffocating defense. And just to see them like not run the ball and make dumb mistakes, commit dumb penalties, turn the ball over a couple times. I just think it was, given what was expected of them heading into the playoffs and then as they gained momentum, in some ways, I think it was just a worse loss for them. They were at home, they have a crazy crowd, and it was just depressing. I got friends who are Ravens fans, and I talked to them after the game, and it was just, they just had no answers. And also, we'll talk about this in a minute, but, that Lamar Jackson's playoff record at this point is, considering the level of player he is pretty disappointing. And this is just another chapter of that. So for me, I thought it was maybe a worse loss from a franchise standpoint for the Ravens. Also, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, I think the Lions, like, the arrow's pointing up for them.
Yeah.
And they'll be back. And the NFC isn't as strong. There aren't all these great young quarterbacks. I think for the Ravens, they have Lamar, and they have a great coach, and they have a really good defense, but they got a lot of veterans on that team. And I'm not so sure it's going to be that easy for them to get back to like a position where they're hosting an AFC title game. So I'll leave it there. But bad losses for both teams, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah. Well, sticking with the Ravens, Dave, the Ravens led the NFL in rushing attempts and yards this season. Last Sunday, their running backs somehow only had 6 combined attempts for less than 30 yards. In a game where Baltimore never trailed by more than 10 points, did the Ravens panic? What happened to Todd Monken's offense, and why did they abandon the run, you think?
It's inexplicable, really. It really didn't make a lot of sense. The way the Ravens offense works and gets defenses on their heels is by effectively running the ball. And that includes Lamar. And Lamar did, have some success on the ground in this game. But, because Lamar is so dangerous as a runner and they run all these, kind of like read options, you don't really know who has the ball. They use play action effectively. Each season that Lamar's been the starter, they've been like top 3 in the NFL in yards per carry. And that includes, they've had a lot of injuries at running back, and it almost doesn't matter who they've had back there. Whether it's Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Justice Hill. I mean, they've had a bunch of other running backs. They need to run the ball to make their offense work. They need to run the ball with their running backs. And, it was almost like they fell behind and they just didn't know what to do. It was 7-0, then it was 7-7, then it was 14-7, then it was 17-7. And it was that way for much of the second half. It wasn't like they were way down. We've seen it with like a team like the Titans, a team that can really run the ball when they were good, not this past season, but where they'll run Derrick Henry when they're down 14 points. That's just a big part of their identity offensively. And the Ravens just kind of inexplicably just didn't try to run the ball with their running backs. And it's even more egregious because that's the way to attack the Chiefs. The Chiefs have a very good pass defense, that Spagnuolo defense blitzes from all different places. You don't know where the extra rushers are coming from. But I think they were like a little below average against the run, like 17th or 18th against the run this year. That's where Baltimore's bread is buttered. I just didn't really understand it. And I don't know. What did you think?
I don't know. You made a interesting comment earlier where you're talking about, did the Ravens panic? I think after they had that double-digit deficit heading into halftime, they maybe did panic and get away from what they were accustomed to doing, what they had success doing. I did think that early on it was weird that they relied so much on Lamar instead of just doing what they're good at. They had Gus Edwards, Justice Hill. They have a good duo of running backs there. I didn't understand why they weren't trying to attack Kansas City's defense that way, because we'd seen all season that they had issues stopping the run. So it was weird that they put so much on Lamar's plate in like the biggest game of the season. Not that he's not capable of, having a big game, but it was weird how they put all that pressure on him. It was like they wanted to match KC's offense for some reason.
Yeah, and it might have been better for the Ravens if they had played from behind a few more times this year, because
Oh yeah.
I saw a stat that like, I think in the second half of games this year, like 80% of the snaps they took in the second half, they were leading. So they really didn't have the experience that much this year of playing from behind. And again, it's not like they were way behind and they had to throw the ball. So it was pretty inexplicable. Just sticking with this game, let's talk about the Chiefs for a little bit, because we can blame the Ravens all we want. The fact is, the Chiefs played phenomenal defense in this game, and have really played phenomenal defense throughout the playoffs. They've won back-to-back playoff games as road underdogs. And, you look at this era now, in the 6 seasons that Patrick Mahomes has been the starter, they've gone to 4 Super Bowls. And the 2 years they didn't go to the Super Bowl, they lost the AFC title game in overtime. So, they've been it hasn't lasted for as long, but this is starting to look like the Patriots,
Yeah.
Well, what they did for 2 decades. Like they're there every year. However, their offense really struggled in the, they kind of look great their first 2 drives. They have like the Andy Reid scripted, start to the game. They march right down the field and scored. But in the second half, they struggled on offense, which they've done a lot this season. They didn't score in the second half, and they punted 5 times, and then, the game ended with them having possession. But, Paul, are we continuing to sell this team short, and especially that defense, Steve Spagnuolo's defense? And how concerned should we be about their offense as they head into the Super Bowl?
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo, what he's been able to do with that Kansas City Chiefs defense is nothing short of really incredible. I mean, they've got some good players, but they don't really have any superstars outside of Chris Jones, who arguably the best defensive tackle in the league. And then it's a bunch of guys who are just really, really good. They've just got some solid players all around. That scheme has really done wonders for them. As far as the offense goes, you know what? I think what they did in the second half is, not to take anything away from Baltimore's defense, but seeing how their defense was playing, I think they just were trying to avoid on making any mistakes, not really giving Baltimore a chance to get back in the game. So they probably weren't as aggressive as they might have been. I thought they probably just felt comfortable with that lead that they had, and they said, let's just not, try to lose this game. I think that's kind of maybe the mentality that they might have had.
Yep, that could be.
So Dave, moving on here, where do the Ravens go from here? I mean, the stars seemed to line for them this season. Joe Burrow and Deshaun Watson got hurt. Lamar played outstanding football. They stayed fairly healthy, and their defense was dominant, and they had home field in the AFC. DC Mike McDonald has moved on, which is definitely something they'll need to overcome. Can they get back to this level in the next couple of seasons, or was this their best shot in a loaded AFC?
Well, I kind of hinted at this, I think, in a earlier discussion we had. The AFC is tough. Like we already talked about how dominant the Chiefs have been, so you have to go through them. The Bills are right there. I think with Burrow back, the Bengals certainly in the last couple of years have been, they're a team that's beaten the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl, and we're in the AFC title game the next year. You've got now, who knows how good the Texans can be with CJ Stroud. You've got Aaron Rodgers in the conference. Miami looked really good for part of this season. Now Jim Harbaugh is coming to the Chargers. They've got Justin Herbert. And they're in such a tough division that I really think this was kind of a little window for the Ravens. They're an excellent team. They have an excellent defense. And Lamar's a superstar. And as long as they have him, they're going to be a very competitive team. And they're obviously well coached, although, losing their defensive coordinator, that's not minor.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if they'll make an AFC title game in the next 2 or 3 years. They certainly could. But I don't think they'll be the preseason favorites in the AFC next year, even though they were the 1 seed this year. I think really, like you said, the stars kind of aligned, and this was a golden opportunity for Lamar and that team to get to the Super Bowl. And as I mentioned before, Lamar's now 2-4 in the playoffs, and the doubt creeps in a little bit. As good as he is, he has not been great in the playoffs and in really big games. And I'm a Lamar defender always. I think he's a terrific player and a unique talent. And he'll get better as a passer, but I don't know how long he can be this good as a runner. So he's kind of the kind of quarterback you want to win with him early, I think. While he can still strike so much fear in defenses as a runner. Like QBs who run as much as he does, and you probably see this with Josh Allen also, when they turn 30, Aaron Rodgers ran a lot, not like these guys, but, he was pretty mobile early in his career. And then, you see these guys stop running because they just get too old for it. They don't want to take the hits, and they're not as fast anymore. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the Ravens, I think they blew a pretty golden opportunity to go to a Super Bowl, but we'll see. They've surprised me before. They're usually a good team. They draft really well. So they'll certainly be in the mix. Let's move over to the NFC. So we talked about this earlier, but the Lions, a 24-7 lead at the half. They were kind of doing whatever they wanted to do. Had the 49ers on their heels. It kind of felt like the 49ers were never going to be able to stop them. And with that big a lead, the Lions might just be able to sustain a few long drives in the second half and just shorten the game and not give the 49ers enough possessions to come back. But, there was a turnover. There were, the Lions went for some fourth downs that we can talk about this. They probably shouldn't have gone for, rather than kicking field goals. And then his clock management at the end of the game has been really attacked, as have the decisions to not kick those field goals. Where do you stand on kind of how he coached this game in the second half and the various decisions that Dan Campbell made?
The Lions blew this game for a variety of reasons, and the finger can be pointed out a couple of Lions players, and definitely Dan Campbell. But, the reason they lost this game in my eyes is partially because they didn't convert on those fourth down tries that you mentioned, Dave. But the fact that the defense gave up 27 points and a half that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, they also had some critical drops. One of the fourth downs that they didn't convert was a nice
Josh
low
Reynolds,
pass
man.
from Goff to Josh Reynolds, and he just didn't catch it. I mean, that's a catch an NFL receiver has to make. I think the one thing Campbell did that was unforgivable, although the game was probably pretty much lost at that point, was using a timeout. When they got close and they were down 10, and they ran the ball on the third down and then had to burn a timeout. You just can't do that. When you need 2 scores in the final 2 minutes, you can't count on an onside kick. They almost never recover those. So you got to get the 1 score, and you have to have all 3 timeouts so that you can get the ball back with more than a few seconds, if you can get the ball back.
Right.
And burning that timeout was critical because they got the touchdown. And if they had still had the 3 timeouts, they could have at least tried to get 1 stop, get the ball back with like over a minute left, only needing a field goal. Or they could have kicked the field goal and saved the 3 timeouts. But running on third down was to my mind just kind of an unforgivable that he made. And the other thing is, I don't know if he trusts his kicker or not, but if you don't trust your kicker to make a 40, and especially I'm talking about the fourth down they didn't go for that would have tied the game. It was 27-24. You don't want to go down 2 scores. It would have been, I think, a 47 or 48-yard field goal. And if you don't trust your kicker to make that, then you shouldn't be your kicker. But, it's kind of been their identity all year to go for fourth downs. So I think they were kind of being true to who they are, and it just didn't work out. Is kind of how I would think about all that.
Yeah, and that would be man, to make it that far in the playoffs and not trust your kicker, that's a situation for sure.
Yep.
So Brock Purdy started slow, Dave, and threw his first interception of the postseason in a bad first half for the 49ers. But he settled down and led his team to a 27-point second half and the win. How big was this game for him and his confidence?
I think big. He's shown a penchant for sometimes starting a little slow and then kind of getting better as the game goes on. And, he's got great weapons, and he's pretty good at playing within himself. He's humble. He wasn't expected to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, so this is all kind of new to him. But he has a pretty crazy record now. He's something like 24-6 as a starter since he took over, kind of early in his rookie year, just because everyone in front of him got hurt. The Super Bowl's different. It'll be like no game he's ever played. It's got like almost a, double length halftime, if not more, which is something I've heard players talk about, how that's a weird adjustment the first time you do it. Obviously, the Chiefs have a quarterback who's well-versed in this because he's been going to the Super Bowl almost every year of his career as a starter. But I think this was big for Brock Purdy because, the 49ers have not played their best game. They barely beat the Packers in a game they could have easily lost, and they barely beat the Lions. Well, they kind of won that game going away in the second half a little bit, but also a game they could have easily lost. So they're maybe starting to believe in themselves a little more, having escaped. And I think this was big for Brock Purdy. He played really well in the second half. Led some important drives, brought his team back, and that's what you got to do. And then the rest of the team starts to have more confidence in you too. And I think the 49ers players really do believe in him. I don't think it's BS when they're interviewed and they say, we have all the confidence in the world in Brock. I really think they do, and in the system and in the Shanahan scheme that he runs.
Yeah.
And I think he's a good quarterback for that. So yeah, I think it was big for him.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you think about him being the last pick of the draft and just probably, hearing all the whispers about, him maybe not even making the team. Who knows what was said about him? But for him to get his opportunity and then kind of run away with it, he's proven a lot of people wrong. So, I mean, and this is just another achievement for him. So, yeah, it's cool to see.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of redemption. Last year, what happened to him against the Eagles had to be tremendously disappointing. He got hurt and came out of the game, but had to go back in because his backup got hurt, which was like their fourth string quarterback.
Yeah.
you know, and he had to go back in and he couldn't throw the ball. I mean, they knew all they could do was run. And so that had to be tremendously disappointing. He gets another chance in an NFC title game and leads his team to a comeback win. And now he's in a Super Bowl. So yeah, pretty impressive, what wasn't that impressive and what hasn't been that impressive in their two playoff games is the 49ers defense. They really struggled against the Lions. The Lions had 28 first downs, 460 plus yards of offense, 180 yards on the ground, 3 rushing touchdowns from 3 different runners. And really, like I said, in the two playoff games, the 49er defense has not looked like the defense we kind of saw early in the season and what we saw last year and kind of what we expect out of them. So, the Chiefs offense has not been what we've expected from them either. But what does this defense need to do to right the ship and play better in the Super Bowl?
That's a good question, Dave. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer, but I think if San Francisco could just play disciplined defense, they've got the pieces on defense, and somehow take away Kelsey and Pacheco. I know that's easier said than done. That could be the winning formula, but really, you don't know what you're going to get from the Chiefs
Yeah.
offense just because Patrick Mahomes is so good and we've seen that different players are starting to step up. I mean, we could see him. Marquez Valdez-Scantling have a big game. We could see Noah Gray have a big game. We could see Jerick McKinnon have a big game. You don't really know what to expect from the Chiefs, but I don't know. I mean, you don't want to bet against the 49ers, but you definitely don't want to bet against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and looking, if I'm the Chiefs and I'm looking at the last 2 games and looking at how well Isaiah Pacheco's run the ball,
Yeah.
this could easily be a big Pacheco game where the Chiefs kind of try to take the air out of the ball, shorten the game, limit the 49ers possessions. And the 49ers, if you watch them, they kind of play this base defense with 4 down linemen and then they kind of rely on Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw to sort of clean everything up in the run game. And it just hasn't been. Those guys are great linebackers and they have really good down linemen, but offenses can exploit that. It's like a light box. And you saw it with the Lions. I mean, the Lions had like big running lanes. And you saw it with Aaron Jones a little bit in the first playoff game. So I'm going to be interested in seeing how the 49ers kind of maybe try to fix their defense a little bit, knowing the Chiefs are going to want to run the ball and that the Chiefs have kind of like a battering ram running back that they won't mind giving the ball to 25 times if the big holes are there.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about the Lions, Dave, and the Lions probably overachieved this season, but they were 30 minutes away from representing the NFC in the Super Bowl. Is there any reason to think this team won't be a favorite in the NFC next season?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I think the arrow is definitely pointing up for them. I think probably this set of playoffs and especially this last game was I mean, look, it sucks that they lost and it sucks that they lost the way they did, but I think it was probably a good learning experience from them if you're going to take some positive away from it. It was another big game for Jared Goff where he played well. He didn't throw any interceptions, drove them down for that last touchdown when they really needed it, ran the offense pretty well, played well all season. They have Laporta is a star in the making. Amon-Ra St. Brown is in his prime and has been great every season he's been in the NFL. Jameson Williams, they unleashed him a little bit in this game. I mean, he only touched the ball 3 times, but he scored 2 touchdowns. and hopefully they'll improve that defense, and especially their secondary, which was a weakness this year. But yeah, I think in an NFC that's not that strong, the Packers are going to challenge them in that division, I think. And the Vikings were pretty good last year, but I think the Lions going into this coming season are, a top 3 team in the NFC, and everyone should expect them to be back in the playoffs kind of regularly over the next couple of years, I would think. What do you
Agreed,
think about them?
100%. No, yeah, they are definitely a top 3 team in the NFC. You talked about it earlier, how there's not really a lot of young quarterbacks in the NFC right now. So, the NFC is kind of wide open. Of course, you've got the 49ers, and it feels like it's the 49ers and everybody else, but I think the Lions are right there.
Yeah, I mean, you've got we haven't talked about those NFC East teams at all. And Dallas and Philly, I mean, for most of this season, it was kind of the early in the season, if you think back, it was really like San Francisco, Dallas, and Philly kind of looked like they had separated themselves, like 3 teams at the top of the conference, and then Detroit was right behind them. And then it was everybody else. And then as the season went on, the Eagles started playing really poorly, and kind of it was really the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Lions, I think, were the 3 best teams consistently throughout the season. So we'll see. The draft, obviously things change. And there's always some team like the Texans this year, and maybe with where they sit in the draft, it's the Bears or someone like that. There'll be some team that kind of comes out of nowhere. Maybe the Rams, which wouldn't be out of nowhere. I mean, the Rams were really good down the stretch this year too. So it'll be interesting, I think, in the NFC next year, other than the NFC South, which I think will continue to not have any teams that are kind of among the best in the conference. So we've broken down how we got here. And like I said, a lot's been written and said and podcasted over the last 9 or 10 days. But this is what happens with 2 weeks in between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. It's good for people like you and me who like to come on the air and talk about football, and for all the writers and everyone else, because there's a lot to talk about. But in any case, we'll sort of shift over to the Super Bowl now. So as you mentioned in the intro to the show, this is a rematch of a Super Bowl that happened 4 years ago, which the Chiefs won, and it was Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid's first Super Bowl championship, together and individually also. Big difference there is that 49ers team, the quarterback was Jimmy Garoppolo, going up against Patrick Mahomes. Now it's Brock Purdy. But a lot, and obviously teams turn over every year. Christian McCaffrey was not on that 49ers team. But it's a number of the same characters. And these teams certainly know each other. A lot of people, I think, wanted to see the Lions. A lot of people wanted to see the Ravens. There were a lot of people hoping the Bills would finally break through. I know people got really tired of the Patriots. I don't know if people feel that way about the Chiefs yet. And the 49ers have kind of been a perennial powerhouse the last 5 years, even though they haven't won a Super Bowl. Is this a matchup people want to see? And are you excited for this matchup, or were you hoping for something else?
I wouldn't say I'm excited, but I like this game because, 1, it is a rematch, and 2, these are the best teams. I really do feel that way. I don't know if NFL fans wanted this matchup again because it's not really cool or exciting, but I do think this is going to be a good game. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I think it's also, you've got a couple of the biggest stars in the game in this game. You got Christian McCaffrey, who, was kind of like toiled most of his career on a Panthers team that, they were better than they were this past 2 years, but, what wasn't a great team. So this is kind of his first moment to shine, and it's in the place he's from. Patrick Mahomes, obviously the biggest star in the game. Travis Kelce, one of the biggest stars in the game, and now has the whole Taylor Swift thing, so he's become even more famous. There are probably more 13 to 18-year-old girls now who know who Travis Kelce is than a year ago.
Yeah.
Then there's some players that aren't household names like Trent Williams and Fred Warner, George Kittle, obviously Deebo Samuel. There's a lot of really good players in this game. Nick Bosa, Chris Jones. So I don't know. I mean, I like seeing different teams make the Super Bowl, but I also like NFL history. And, dynasties are rare, and nobody's won back-to-back Super Bowls since the Patriots did it in 03 and 04. So it's been almost 20 years, and the Chiefs trying to do that, trying to make it, what would it be, 3 and 5 years. I think if the Niners win, they join the Patriots and maybe the Steelers as teams with 6 Super Bowl wins. The Cowboys have 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the 49ers are chasing a little bit of history in that regard too. So I don't know. It's I'd like to see different teams. But at the same time, like you said, these are certainly 2 of the 3 or 4 best teams in the NFL, if not the 2 best teams.
Mm-hmm.
The coaching matchup is compelling. So look, people are going to watch the Super Bowl no matter who it is. And
Right.
if the 2 teams give you a good game, people are going to be excited to watch it. They're not changing the channel. So we could have done worse. And I think this will be a compelling watch. And both teams wear red, which is I don't know who. I haven't seen the uniform thing. I don't know who's wearing white and who's wearing red, but
I believe the Chiefs are wearing red, is what I
Chiefs are
heard.
in red. Okay, interesting.
So one thing that NFL is really good at doing is storylines, Dave. And heading into the Super Bowl, there's a few already. What's your favorite storyline for this game?
I know we overemphasize the quarterbacks, but for me, it's like the guy who was the last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant in his second season, going up against the guy who's clearly the best player in the NFL and who's already won 2 Super Bowls, 2 MVPs, 2 Super Bowl MVPs in the game for the 4th time in 5 years. It's just sort of that interesting matchup of, a quarterback that no one ever expected to be starting in the NFL, much less starting a Super Bowl, against the quarterback that's been rightly anointed as the heir apparent to Tom Brady as the GOAT, clearly the best player in the game, kind of a magician with the ball. This is not the best Chiefs team, and the fact that he and the rest of the team have gotten to the Super Bowl is a little bit of a tribute to him. I mean, he hasn't had a great season, but he's done enough, with limited weapons around him. So that's my favorite storyline. I know it's kind of a sort of low-hanging fruit to pick.
Yeah.
What's yours, Paul?
Well, Dave, I think you and I are picking from the same tree, sir, because that's my favorite storyline as well.
Okay. Well, that's fair. So sticking with storylines, and it's only Tuesday, what storyline for this Super Bowl are you most sick of already?
Taylor Swift making it to the Super Bowl on time is starting to get pretty annoying to me. I mean, I don't mind her being at the games. I don't mind how much they show her or anything. I've kind of gotten over it. She's just a fan, having fun, rooting, cheering on her boyfriend. There's nothing wrong with that, but they've just made so much of a big deal about her coming from Japan. Will she be there in time to watch the game and everything? I just, of course I'd like to see her at the Super Bowl, but I don't really care if she misses it or not.
Yep, I had the same thing written down, Paul. We're simpatico on the first two questions, and I feel the same way. I got nothing against her. I actually kind of like her, and I like that she's bringing more eyes to the game and to football. But yeah, I don't care if she gets there on time or not. And I'm hoping that that she's not like cutting a show short and short shrifting fans, and I don't think she would do that. But that storyline has nothing to do with the game, so I'm less interested in it.
They did some number crunching, and they because of like brand and other things, Taylor Swift has helped the NFL earn over $300 million this season. I
Doesn't
thought that was pretty
surprise me.
crazy.
Does
Yeah,
not surprise me. And it's she's earning what she's earning probably regardless. Her shows are all sold out. But
Yeah,
maybe her album sales are up and her Spotify hits and all that kind of stuff just because you've got like more, it's a marketing match made in heaven between these two. And especially, look, if the Chiefs had lost to the Dolphins in round 1 or the Bills in round 2, then that's kind of the end of it. But because they keep winning and have gotten to another Super Bowl, it's just, and the Super Bowl is the biggest, as big as Taylor Swift's concerts are and as big as her tour has been, and the Grammys that she just won, there's nothing bigger than the Super Bowl. So, making that all part of it is just, it is a sort of a marketing match made in heaven. I'm sure it's been great for Travis Kelce too.
yeah. Apparently, Travis Kelce. I don't know how true this is or not, but because on his Pfizer commercials, apparently he's making more from those than he is from the NFL. I don't know how true it is that not, but I found that interesting.
That's probably true.
Yeah. Getting back to football here, Dave. Kyle Shanahan is looking for his first Super Bowl win, which is, man, that is surprising. Andy Reid is one of 10 coaches with 2 Super Bowl wins, is looking to join a much smaller list if he can win this one. Only 4 coaches have 3 or more Super Bowl wins. Which coach needs this one more?
I mean, I think it's got to be Kyle Shanahan because he hasn't won one, and his regular season record is actually not that great. I think he's 64-51. He's had a
Oh,
little more
wow.
success than that in the playoffs. Part of that is his first 2 seasons, the team was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Won like 6 games in 4 games, and then he's really turned it around. In fact, I remember after his second season, there were sort of whispers of, is he on the hot seat? Like maybe he's just like, it's a nepotism thing. Like he's Mike Shanahan's son and he's not that good a coach. But he really has turned it around there. He's in his second Super Bowl, got to the conference championship game last year and fell just short. In his 7th season, I think he needs this more than Andy Reid. Andy Reid has already won 2 Super Bowls. Kind of, this one would put him, like you said, sort of in a little bit more rarefied air of
Mm-hmm.
the greatest NFL coaches of all time. I think he's already. I looked at this before and I forget now, but in terms of total playoff wins, I think he trails only Belichick now. He's got a lot of playoff wins because if you remember, he went to 4 conference championship games in a row as coach of the Eagles, and now he's been to 6 in a row as coach of the Chiefs. I mean, the guy's been to 10 conference championship games. That's pretty incredible. And that's, I think, tied with Belichick maybe, or might even be more. I don't even know. Maybe it's not as many as Belichick. I don't know. But Andy Reid is, carving a tremendous legacy.
Yeah.
And it'll only grow if he wins this. But I think Shanahan needs this more and probably is hungrier for it at this moment.
I would agree. Yeah, we talked about this on the Cowboys podcast last night, but really for his legacy, Shanahan needs this victory. He really does.
Yeah, because I think there's some people who kind of think like he's a great schemer and a great offensive mind.
Right.
And his teams are great in the regular season and they could score a lot of points, but like when push comes to shove and you're in the playoffs and you're facing like a really good team every week and better defenses, does it work? You saw it with like, one of his disciples this year, Mike McDaniel in Miami. Like, it works great when you're playing the Broncos early in the season and you score 70 points. When you got a bunch of games at the end of the season against, Buffalo and Dallas and Baltimore and then Kansas City in the playoffs, does all this stuff work? And I think Shanahan kind of needs a Super Bowl win to say, hey, look, I got a system and the system wins Super Bowls. So we'll see. So want to talk about a player I mentioned earlier. With 2 more touchdowns this past week, Christian McCaffrey has a ridiculous 25 total touchdowns on the season, including the playoffs. Can Kansas City stop him? And what other keys to the game are you looking for when San Francisco has the ball and Kansas City's on defense?
Dave, you can't really stop McCaffrey. You can only hope to contain him. I think KC has to focus on getting stops on third down. Of course, every defense has to worry about that. But if the 49ers dominate the time of possession, that will be a problem for Kansas City, I think, because I think Kansas City's offense right now is a lot about rhythm.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, Kansas City's defense, they blitz a lot. And so I'm interested to see when the 49ers have the ball, how they deal with those blitzes. And, Brock Purdy's pretty good against the blitz. With Kansas City, you don't always know where the blitzers are coming from. And a lot of times it's from the secondary. And there's a lot of disguised stuff in that Spagnuolo defense. And the way the 49ers offense works is, getting the ball to their playmakers in space. They're like the yards after the catch. I'm pretty sure they were first in the NFL this year. It was either them or Miami, which isn't surprising since Miami runs, an offshoot offense with McDaniel having come from working for Shanahan. So I think, it'll be interesting to see if the 49ers are able to get the ball to, to Kittle and Debo and Ayuk and McCaffrey in space against that defense. So that's what I'm most looking for when San Francisco has the ball.
Dave, just to go off topic here. I don't know. I don't think we're going to get into this one, but do you think this is going to be a high scoring game?
I don't.
Okay.
And I think it could be a high scoring game.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you look at the Chiefs this year, they've played very few high scoring games. They've yet to score in the 30s in the playoffs. They haven't needed to. Their defense has played really well. I think their defense only allowed like 3 second half points in 3 playoff games. And they've really slowed the game down. They've run the ball, a lot of short passing, not a lot of big shots downfield, not a lot of big chunk plays. Mahomes kind of runs when he needs to. Interestingly, that's something I wanted to mention when I was talking about Purdy. He looked like Patrick Mahomes in the second half of that Lions game. He tucked it and ran for a couple of very key first downs.
Oh yeah.
In the second half of that game. But no, I personally, I think the over-under is 47.5, and I'm not especially a betting man, but if I was going to bet the over-under, I'd probably fans love betting the overs. But I'd probably bet the under. I think this could be a game where it takes a little while. The teams kind of feel each other out. There's a couple 3 and outs early in the game and some long drives that maybe result in field goals and not touchdowns. And so I could see this not being a particularly high scoring game. Maybe something around, 24-17, 24-20, something like that as a final score.
A bettor's nightmare, right?
Yeah, a bettor's nightmare. Do you think it's going to be high scoring?
I talked about this a little bit last night on the Cowboys podcast, but I asked the guys over under total of 50 points, and they both said under. I picked the over only because you look at the playoffs. We've seen in the playoffs, especially the Super Bowl, they don't like to call a lot of penalties. They kind of let the guys play, and with both of these offenses, these offensive-minded guys, you look at the weapons, of course, on San Francisco, they've got the edge there, but I could see this being a high-scoring game.
Yeah, it could be. It certainly could be. I mean, there are weapons more on the 49ers, but, the Chiefs could have just like a throwback game where they open it up and Mahomes is doing Mahomes things and, they need to score to keep up. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a defense, time of possession, field position kind of game, but we'll see.
Yeah. So, Dave, while CMC is the biggest star for San Francisco, Patrick Mahomes is not only the biggest star for KC. He's the biggest star in the NFL and the reigning MVP and Super Bowl MVP. Is he too much of an X factor, and does KC have too big of an advantage at quarterback? What other keys to the game are you looking for when KC has the ball against San Francisco's defense?
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. The 49ers are kind of stubborn in how they play defense, and in 2 playoff games, they've had the ball really run down their throats, but they've escaped with wins. So it hasn't stopped them from winning games, but it has stopped them from winning them comfortably and, having to sweat them out. To the first part of the question, you know, obviously Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, but he can lose games, and he's not invincible, and the Chiefs are not invincible. And I think Brock Purdy, we just don't know because he hasn't played in a Super Bowl yet.
Yeah.
And he hasn't played in that many, really big games. I think the system is designed for him to excel. I think the Chiefs are going to throw some looks at him that he hasn't seen before. And so we'll see
Right.
how he does. But really, the bulk of the question you asked me was more about when the Chiefs have the ball, not when the Niners have the ball. I'm really curious to see if they can stop the run and if they do anything different and commit a little more, maybe bring a safety down a little bit more, knowing that the Chiefs don't really have that much in the way of receivers that can cause that many problems for their defense. Because I think if you're the 49ers, you got to be a little bit concerned at how they've been run on and run over in these 2 playoff games by the Packers and Lions, who like the Chiefs have really good offensive lines, guards that can pull and get out in space and neutralize Greenlaw and Warner when the running back gets to kind of the second level. And if you're only going to have 4 defensive linemen all the time, and you've got like either 5 or 6 blocking 4, there's going to be room to run. And Pacheco is an angry runner. He's been running really well in the playoffs. He ran well against the Ravens. So that's what I'm interested in seeing when the Chiefs have the ball is, can the 49ers stop the run? Will they commit more to try to do that?
Yeah.
So we've talked about offense and defense. We haven't really talked about special teams yet. And I guess the one place I want to talk about this is kicker, because we talked about the disparity at quarterback. The disparity at kicker is one that is also potentially significant. Rookie Jake Moody, 49ers kicker, has had a little bit of an up and down season. He's kicked a lot of extra points, and he's been pretty good with those. But in both playoff games, he missed a field goal. In the 49ers' last game of the season, he missed a field goal and an extra point. So he's missed a field goal in 3 straight games. So obviously his confidence might be shaken a little bit. And I never feel that confident. He was my kicker in fantasy this year, and I never felt that confident seeing him come onto the field. On the flip side, Harrison Butker of the Chiefs was the most accurate kicker in the NFL this year, I think. He missed 2 field goals only, and he hit all his extra points. So I think in total, he hit something like 84 of 86 kicks or something crazy like that. And he's number 2 all time behind only Justin Tucker in field goal accuracy. If you're betting on the 49ers, or you are the 49ers, or you're a fan of the 49ers, and Jake Moody comes out to take like a game tying or game winning kick, and it's outside of, say, 35, 40 yards, how nervous are you?
Extremely nervous. You hold your breath. I mean, but based on those stats, Dave, I'd hate for the game to come down to Jake Moody.
Yeah. And the Niners did lose one game this year. It was the Cleveland game. It was early in the season, maybe like week 5 or 6. It was at Cleveland, and Moody had a kick at the end in the final seconds to win the game, and I think it was a 41-yarder, and he missed it. So yeah, I agree with you. I think if this game comes down to his leg, and you'd hate to see that. I mean, I hate that for any kicker. I think the last time might have been Scott Norwood. Like the last time a kicker in a Super Bowl had a kick to win the game, and if he missed it, his team was going to lose. Hopefully it doesn't come down to that for either kicker, because you'd hate to see a professional athlete have to live with that for the rest of their lives. But anyway, yeah, I think that's a big edge for the Chiefs. And in a game that, could be a close game, I think the kickers matter.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. No doubt about that. What's interesting, another interesting storyline, if you will, or tidbit about this game, Dave, is the line for this game opened at San Francisco at 2.5 underdogs and has bounced around between there and San Francisco at 1.5. Should the 49ers be favored of this game?
Yeah, you said underdogs. I think you meant favorites.
I
The
mean,
49ers
favorites, excuse me.
have been favored since the line came out.
Yeah.
I guess so. They had a little bit of a better season than the Chiefs, and their numbers are a little bit better. But I know that the sports books hate making a game a pick 'em. They just don't like doing that because the game can't end in a tie, right? So they lose a little bit of juice there. Um, uh, but I I really feel like this game's a pick 'em. Like, I don't think either team should be favored. If anything, I think the Chiefs should maybe be favored by a point or a point and a half. I think that they've played better in the playoffs. They've got the best player on the field. They've won 2 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. They're the defending champs. They have more players on their roster who've just played in a Super Bowl, and their defense is better and their kicker is better. Um, I'm not surprised that the 49ers are favored. I'm curious to see, the line, it's already been a week. A lot of money comes in late, and especially a lot of sharp money, sort of institutional professional gambling money. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where the line ends up, like 10 minutes before kickoff. But I think if you like the Chiefs, bet them now, because I think the line will probably keep moving away from the 49ers. And if you can get 2 or 2.5, I think that's pretty good value on the Chiefs. What do you think about it?
Definitely.
What do you think about the line?
Yeah, I don't think it's that crazy, but just considering where the game is being played, the San Francisco 49ers have home field advantage in a sense. So I could kind of understand why maybe Vegas feels that way.
Okay.
Now, I don't think San Francisco, well, we'll get into that, but I don't agree with it, but I can, I'm just trying to make sense of maybe why they feel that way.
All right. Are you teasing into our picks for the game?
Yes, sir. Here we are, Paul and Dave's pitch for the game. Dave, Kansas City versus San Francisco, who wins?
I've gone back and forth on this, but I'm going to pick the Kansas City Chiefs. I've gotten burned the last 2 weeks picking against them. I obviously picked them against the Dolphins. Oh, no, I picked them against the Bills. So I got burned by them last week because I picked the Ravens last week. But before that, I had been picking the Chiefs in the early rounds of the playoffs. I think they have too many intangibles on their side, including the difference at kicker. They've got the better defense. They've got a coach who's won Super Bowls. They've got a quarterback who's won Super Bowls. They have not turned the ball over in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're kind of playing mistake-free football, and I think they can continue that. You called this episode Taylor Swift good luck charm. Maybe apparently there's something with her in the number 13, and this is her 13th game that she's watching, and that's her lucky number.
Oh.
I'm not going to get into all that. The Chiefs, I've thought about this a lot, and I just don't like the way the 49ers defense has been playing. And I think Mahomes and Reid are going to figure out a way to exploit that for more than a quarter. So I'm picking the Chiefs, and my MVP pick, just because quarterbacks win this award, I'll go with Patrick Mahomes. But I think it could be Isaiah Pacheco.
I like that.
I could see him having a big game and a couple touchdowns, and maybe a skill position player gets the award. Who are you picking, and who's your MVP?
Going with Kansas City. I've been riding with them this entire playoffs, Dave. And my MVP pick, Taylor Swift's boyfriend, Travis Kelce.
Okay. Well, if you look at Travis Kelce's career in the playoffs, Now
Yeah.
he's played more than 17 games in the playoffs. But
Right.
his numbers, if you just put his playoff games together and made it a season, it would be the greatest tight end season that's ever happened. He really is has done saved his best for the playoffs. So we both picked the Chiefs, so that's interesting. So we've talked about some of the biggest stars on each team, but when we did this last week, sometimes the playoffs can come down to contributions from less heralded players. Who's one player on each team who might not be a household name, but who you think could be a difference maker on Sunday? And give me both
I could
teams, and
see,
then I'll do mine.
Shanahan's going to go into the very back of the playbook here, Dave. And for the San Francisco 49ers, give me Kyle Juszczyk.
All
Juszczyk.
right. Use check.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's Juszczyk. And for Kansas City, this is going to be, he might be a household name. I'm not really sure. But Jerick McKinnon, I can see him making some impact plays as well.
Yeah, I thought about McKinnon. I'll go with the guy who you mentioned earlier, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I could see if the game starts to get a little shootouty, or if the Chiefs need, a big play late in the game. Valdez-Scantling had one big catch last week. He's for better or worse, he's their deep threat. Doesn't have the best hands. Although as between him and Kadarius Toney, he doesn't have the worst hands on his team either.
Yeah.
So I'll go with him. And on San Francisco, I'm going to go with Dre Greenlaw, the linebacker. If they're going to stop the run, Greenlaw had 2 picks against the Packers. He was, kind of a very impactful game. Last week, kind of a quiet game, mostly because the Lions were running over them. He's actually the guy who got a piece of Jameson Williams' jersey at about the 10-yard line and was left holding a piece of Jameson Williams' jersey. At least I think. But I think if this 49ers team is going to stop Kansas City and force some 3-and-outs and, keep them from just pounding it on the ground, I think he and Fred Warner are both going to have big games. So he's kind of a big game player, plays with a lot of emotion and enthusiasm. So I have my eye on him.
Yeah, I like both of those picks. I like how you always go with the defensive player. You sneak one of those guys in there. I like that.
Pick one, yeah. They're always wrong, but
Well, Dave, here we are with our bold call Super Bowl edition. Dave, give us your bold call for the week.
All right, my bold call is that the Chiefs defense holds the 49ers to under 20 points, which has happened. I didn't look it up, but I can't imagine that's happened more than a couple times this season, if at all.
Yeah.
They hold the 49ers to under 20 points en route to their back-to-back Super Bowl wins. What is your bold call of the week?
My bold call of Super Bowl edition, Dave. Christian McCaffrey will have more touchdowns than Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy.
Wow. Could happen. He's got 25, like I said. So, all right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed our Super Bowl breakdown. Certainly not the only one out there, but hopefully we did this in a way that was a little different than some of the other shows you might listen to. So thank you for tuning in. Paul, remind everyone where they can find you on not Twitter and get any of your content.
Yes, you can find me on not Twitter at Paul_Ryan15. And my Cowboys podcast is streaming there every Monday at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I've recently started recording shorts, so you can find those on YouTube. And some new content, not football or fantasy related. I started a food review channel. I've only recorded one video, so look out for those. There's a little bit funner side for me.
Interesting. Is that just like Dallas based, or?
Well, my handle, I decided to go with Fort Worth Foodie. So what I'd like to do is eventually like start trying more places around Fort Worth, kind of giving people an idea of what kind of food is around. And maybe focusing on like mom and pops type shops and things like that.
Very cool. I didn't
Yeah.
know you were doing that. That's congratulations on starting to do that. You'll have to one day when I come down to Fort Worth, you'll have to take me to some of the best spots around.
I will. I'll be happy to. When I go to New York, you have to take me to get a couple slices, Dave.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I know the good spots.
Yes, sir. Dave, where can we find you on that Twitter and talk to us about your content?
Yep, you can find me at Pigskin Papers and at my website, thepigskinpapers.com. Haven't written anything since the end of the regular season, but should have some content, some kind of year-end fantasy content, bounce back candidates, players that disappointed this year. I might do a retrospective of sort of how I did with my players to avoid and players to target at ADP. I have to see
That's
how
always fun.
badly I did before I commit to writing that. It might be too embarrassing, or maybe I got a lot right. I don't even remember. It was so long ago, but I should have some content up in the next couple weeks.
Sounds good. Well, guys, I'm Paul. He is Dave. As always, we appreciate you joining us, and we will see you guys next week.
Enjoy the Super Bowl.